We're going to start out by diving into some theory. So has anyone here heard of Richard Elmore, Harvard professor, wrote Instructional Rounds? Okay, great. We're going to dive into some excerpts from that book. After that, we're going to establish and agree on some criteria for evidence. And then finally, we're going to start applying it. So we're going to play an evidence game where you have to identify if something is or is not evidence. And then we'll align that to the instructional practices. After that, you will go into your breakout groups and actually conduct an observation of a teacher via a video lesson. So here's what Liz City and Richard Elmore are saying about evidence. They're saying a couple of really key things. First, it must be descriptive, fine-grained, and useful. We don't have to write that the teacher wrote on the board in green marker if that doesn't matter. If green is verbs and yellow is nouns, then it matters, right? But if it's not useful, we don't have to use it. Then focus on...
That's actually great when the children give the wrong answer and the teacher accepts it as the correct answer. It's a great way to capture, that kind of evidence.
And if in a feedback conversation we say, you gave the wrong answer to the students, if I'm that teacher that you're giving that feedback to, I'm likely to get a little bit defensive. But if you instead say, here's a piece of evidence that I heard in your classroom, then I have to own that. I'm less likely to become defensive about a judgment you just made about me. Thank you. And so what I want to ask you to do is work with someone next to you and answer two questions. Number one, is it evidence? Does it meet our criteria? And then number two, if so, which instructional practice would you align it to? And take 2 minutes for that, please. First off, by a show of hands, your thumbs up or down, is it evidence? Yes, we agree it's evidence. Okay, so now dig in. Which of the instructional practices does it relate to? Okay, we agree too. Curriculum-driven opportunities to determine the meaning of general and domain-specific words, right? We're talking about vocabulary even though it's prefix, so we're not talking about complex vocabulary. Let's go to another one. Students were unclear about the objective of the social studies activity. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay, so if we ever have to ask this question, how do you know? It's not evidence. Because the answer to the question, how do you know, is the evidence, right? So students were unclear about the objective of the social studies activity. No. How do you know that that's not evidence? What's the actual evidence? What would you expect to see for actual evidence here? I'll share what she said. That the kids don't know what's happening. That they raise their hand and say, what are we doing? That they look confused and they go like this, okay? So that is more of the evidence. That's how we know. So today we're doing a session on high-impact feedback, and this is heavily related to what we did last Wednesday on observation. And today, both in the feedback session, the plenary that we're doing now, as well as the breakout session that you do with your assistant superintendent a little bit after this in the afternoon, we're going to rely heavily on what we discussed back on Wednesday, thinking about our criteria for evidence, thinking about that ladder of inference and wanting to be on the bottom rung of the ladder. And all of that is extremely important, not only in observation, but the whole kind of prize, which is the feedback. The observation we just see as the prereq for the feedback. Effectiveness theory is saying we're using rubrics for a reason. When I started teaching in Houston, Texas, and my first evaluation was a checklist. And it was literally 8 things. Did I have a decorated bulletin board? Did I use technology? And I got a check because I turned on my overhead projector. It was things like that. Is my classroom clean? And it was yes or no. It was dichotomized. And effectiveness theory is saying that these things are not yes or no. They're on a continuum, right? I don't just say an objective or I don't. There's different qualities of it, right? I might make it relevant or I might not. I might put it into student-friendly language or I might not. And so effectiveness theory says we want to see these things on a continuum. And so if right now, after Karen does an observation of me, I'm currently in needs improvement relative to how I'm communicating with students, then she has particular feedback to me that's kind of needs improvement-ish. I didn't totally bomb it, but it wasn't an exemplar for how to present an objective. And so if we're not saying you're at level 1 on a 4-point scale, then I might not necessarily look at a rubric and say, here's what I need to do next in order to improve. So that's effectiveness theory. Again, I totally see the utility in being able to give feedback to a teacher without the number for a bunch of like rapport building reasons. So I think we hear this. I think like there was significant clapping after you spoke, right? And that means that people are supporting it. And so the team knows it. Do you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, I would say I definitely